Howdy, folks. This is David Cobb, campaign manager for the Stein Baraka campaign. I am coming to you live to basically take comments or questions, but I'll tell you as we get started, one of the things that's really on my mind is the fact that, frankly, that Keith Ellison was unsuccessful in his bid for the Democratic National Committee chair position. Now, obviously, I'm a Green, and I'm not a member of the Democratic Party, but I once was. And it made me think about the fact that, back in 1984, 1988, I worked on Jesse Jackson's campaign as a student volunteer in 84, and then later more actively in 88. And then in 92, I worked on Jerry Brown's campaign. I learned a lot during those things. I learned how to put myself under the leadership of people of color. I learned how to build alliances between environmentalists and organized labor. I learned all sorts of important things. But at the end of the day, the most important lesson is that the Democratic Party's presidential primary is where progressive politics goes to die, because all of the enthusiasm, all of the excitement, everything that happens is basically squashed. It wasn't just the Jackson campaign, because I really want to underscore from my perspective what happened. In 84 and 88, this amazing Rainbow Coalition was built, right? And it was really a phenomenal thing to be part of. And as a young person, I thought elections would always be like that. It would always be phenomenal, and you would be grappling over big picture issues and how to properly structure society. See, I thought that's what elections would be. But of course, what happened was all that enthusiasm and energy and excitement are squashed by the corporatist, militarist, imperialists who actually control the Democratic Party. And then we were told as progressives, all right, sit down, shut up, get to the back of the bus. And then 4 years later, the same thing happened. Jerry Brown built a powerful effort to challenge the entrenched imperialist corporatists who control the Democratic Party. They, too, were actually squashed. So at the end of the day, the reality is that there was no way for a genuine effort to restructure society to ever go anywhere within the Democratic Party. That's what I've come to. And this notion that Bernie Sanders can somehow create our revolution as an organization and shift the Democratic Party to the left also made me remember that in 1988, Jesse Jackson thought, I know what we need to do. Let's create an independent organization, take over the Democratic Party, and shift it to the left. That organization was called the Rainbow Push. Then, 4 years later, Jerry Brown rises up within the Democratic Party progressive primary process, squashed by the corporatist militarist who control the party. He said, I know what we need to do. Let's create an independent organization, go into and let's see if we're back. I'm going to check in and see. Let's see. How are we doing now? Is this better? I'm going to check and see. And my apologies, folks. This is all right. So I just want to go back to the reality is that we had the effort by Jerry Brown to create an organization to take the Democratic Party to the left, and that organization was called We the People. And then we had the effort of Dennis Kucinich, a progressive effort rising up within the Democratic Party primary process, squashed by the corporatist, militarist, imperialist who control that party. And then he said, I know what let's do. Let's create an organization, independent, take over the Democratic Party, take it to the left. That was called Progressive Democrats of America. Howard Dean tried it with Democracy for America. And of course, Howard Dean went on to become the DNC chair. So all I'm saying is that there is this repeated efforts to attempt to create organizations independent of the corporatist, militarist, who control the Democratic Party and then take it to the left. And so far, they've never worked. Now let me share with you my read of what has worked to make this kind of systemic change that the Green Party represents. And I think that most of you who are watching would like to see happen. And I'm going to give you a list of what it took alternative political parties, because I really think that the lesson to learn is that in order to make systemic change, you have to actually replicate a two-step process. It's actually quite easy to describe, but very, very hard to do. The reality is that you have to have a social movement that is broad, deep, conscious, and militant. That's in the pool halls, the bowling alleys, the barbershops, the saloons. I mean, it has to be in all of society. And then you have to have a program and an electoral arm, people running for office on your program. And now let me give you a list of the kind of systemic changes that were made by a combination of mass movements and an electoral arm advocating for that, an alternative political party outside the existing two-party system. Ready? The abolition of slavery, women getting the right to vote, the creation of the Social Security Administration, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation laws, pure food and drug laws, ending child labor, the direct election of the United States Senate, the 40-hour work week. For goodness sakes, folks, the entire fabric of what we today consider the bare damn minimum for a just and compassionate society, that fabric was woven together strand by strand, issue by issue, by alternative political party advocates. People who did their work when they were called naive and unrealistic, people who did their work when they were called anti-American, and people who did their work when they were called spoilers. So today, if we want to live in a society, not just talk about it, but actually live in a society that will end war as foreign policy, if we want to live in a society that will guarantee healthcare as a fundamental human right, if we want to live in a society to transfer the economic power of the state to the people themselves and have actual economic democracy, we want to live in a society that will dismantle the International Monetary Fund and withdraw from the World Bank and completely transform the international trade rules of this country. See, if we want to restructure society, which is what I want to do, then we have to recognize that it's going to take alternative political parties advocating for that. So this Ellison versus Perez debate for the DNC, for me, was not that interesting because I just don't think it was going to succeed anyway. But it's really worth pointing out that the corporatist Wall Street Democrats who actually control the Democratic Party are absolutely committed to holding on to it, and they are more committed to holding on to the power than they are to actually trying to win elections. So I'm going to actually now go deep and tell you this. I personally am a revolutionary. I believe that we need to restructure society. We need new social, political, and economic institutions. I don't think that there's any way to actually do that within the two-party system. I think that we're going to have to create an alternative political party based on our core principles and values, but also a program. And I am an eco-socialist. I don't believe that we can actually have this world that I want to live in under a capitalist system, under empire, under a culture of white supremacy, or under a culture of patriarchy. So I have a vision that is much broader and deeper, and I think that lots of people do. And so if you are hearing this and you're thinking, wow, I'd like to be part of that too, I want to invite you to get involved at your local or state Green Party, because I think that the Green Party experiment is worth pursuing. I think that the Green Party is likely to be the alternative political party that we, the people, so richly deserve and so desperately need. Because I'll tell you this, my sense of it is that there is no way that these current movements, and I mean Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, Standing Rock, the movements against the prison industrial complex, I could go on and on, right? These movements cannot ultimately be contained within the existing Democratic Party. That's my read. So, We've been at it for 10 minutes. I'm going to do my best now to go through and invite Michael O'Neill, our technical director. Michael, if you've seen any great questions that were there that you want to let me know about, and I'm going to go through here. So Chris asks, big problem. How can the Green Party get traction on the national scale? I got to tell you, my sense of it is that we are better off focused on local races where we can actually win. I know it's ironic considering that I ran for president in 2004 and that I managed Jill's campaign. So I think that we do both, but the real excitement that I have is around local elections and local elections like where we can actually begin to govern. So now I'm going to go to a couple of others, and thank you so much, Michael, for your help here. Joseph Campbell asks, what happened to various recounts that Greens were doing, for example, in Michigan? Is the Greens Party satisfied that there was no vote rigging within the United States? Joseph, the answer is we are absolutely not satisfied. The reality is that what we exposed with our efforts at recounts was just how bad the system is. And if you go to the website VoteGNN.tv and you see the reports that we've done in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, what you see is we never actually got real legitimate recounts, but what we did do was expose just how horrifically bad the system actually is. In addition to that, we're building on that. We're building on that momentum, and we just came away last weekend from a very successful conference. About 150 people attended in Philadelphia, and a big shout out to Sherry Honkala, who's running for state legislature in a special election. Sherry was a presenter there, but we did a voting justice conference where we not only lifted up the election integrity movement, the demand to actually count ballots, which is outrageous that we have to start there, but the other thing that we did was had workshops on ranked choice voting and proportional representation. We had workshops on calls to amend the United States Constitution to abolish corporate constitutional rights and the doctrine that money is First Amendment protected political speech. We had workshops on publicly financed elections, workshops on ending felony disenfranchisement, which of course is a profoundly racist application of our criminal justice system that also is a way to prevent poor people and people of color from being able to vote. We had sections on redistricting. So Joseph, again, we are absolutely believe that we cannot have confidence in the reported election results, but we also have a plan of action for mandatory audits and mandatory recounts in close elections. So please stick with us and get involved in your local area. D.L. Byram asks, what is your view of socialism? Personally, I am a socialist. I'm an eco-socialist. But I absolutely believe in the need to actually have democratic control of the economic institutions. You know, it is important to recognize this, though, that I don't usually sort of lead with that simply because it's not helpful, right? Words are labels used to communicate concepts and ideas. Some words and labels have been used, though, to shut down a conversation. So when somebody asks me directly, as D.L. Byram asked, about my view of socialism, I'm happy to have the conversation. But some people, it just shuts down conversation. But I do want to be clear about something. I think that if we understand socialism as the ability to have economic democracy, the ability to control through a public process how our society's economic institutions function, then I am a socialist, and I think that most people are as well. And let's remember, you know, the post office is a form of socialism, as is the fire department, as is the police department, as is, you know, virtually every public institution, the libraries. These are all examples of it. But I really want to underscore something. Capitalism as an economic system is literally destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself. And more than that, or in addition to that, I guess you can't really get more than that. But in addition to that, capitalism is failing on its own terms because there are contradictions to the capitalist model. It actually presupposes unlimited natural world to commodify. Well, that is over. But capitalism also presupposes unlimited markets to be able to expand to, but it's swept across the globe. And DL, here's the other thing that I think that is important to recognize about capitalism and its internal contradiction and the fact that it's coming to an end. And that is, it was once premised that the capitalists, the people who own the means of production, had an incentive to hire people, right? Why? Because they are extracting the excess value of labor as their profit. Well, today with robotics and automation and so forth, the ruling elite don't even need workers anymore. So we're seeing, part of the reason we're seeing the kind of rise of neo-fascism is not just a political response, although that is part of it, it's also an objective economic response. So I think that we're either going to have economic democracy in the age of robots, or we're going to have fascism in the age of robots. And I prefer economic democracy. And the last thing I really want to say about this, and I see a lot of questions are coming in, looking forward to getting to them all, but I really want to underscore my sense of it, DL, and that is we should be living in paradise right now. There's enough to go around. We're the first generation of human beings on planet Earth that can say with confidence there is enough for everybody to have adequate health care, enough food to eat, a good, decent place to live, quality education. You know, if we all did a little bit of work, we could actually have a fantastic life. But we can't have billionaires. We can't have this kind of unequal, this income inequality simply cannot continue. So that's my quick answer there. Michael Gregory Lewis asked, why hasn't Jill run for Congress rather than losing every time at higher levels? Would love it if she had voiced her issues from a seat in Congress rather than just showing up every 4 years. So Michael, I got to tell you, you're not the only one who is actually giving Jill that advice. Lots of people have been doing it, and we'll see what she does. But I do want to push back. This idea that Jill only shows up every 4 years, I know to be false. I mean, you know, I've gotten to know Jill, and Jill actually served as a local government in Massachusetts. She has been an activist outside of government at the local, state, and national level. And in the last 4 years since she ran for president, she actually helped to create the global climate convergence. She was very active traveling around during the Occupy movement. She was very active in some of the early fights around Keystone and got arrested back then, by the way, not once but twice. So, you know, this idea that Jill only shows up every 4 years is just demonstrably false. I mean, Jill Stein has a profound track record. And if you go and look at her bio on the Jill2016.com, you'll actually see that. So, but your thought about her running for Congress, I think is actually a very compelling idea. And we'll see what Jill decides to do. But right now, I know that she's focused on continuing to travel the country, lifting up her voice, and then helping to lift up Greens at the local and state level, which is where I really think that the energy should be anyway. So thanks for that question. Pete Sounds asks, how do you reason with people who think voting third party is unthinkable, yet advocate punching people they think are Nazis? Look, you know, Pete, I got to tell you that you know, it's an interesting way you frame the question. I'm going to tell you this, that if somebody thinks that there's absolutely no hope in voting for a third party or an alternative political party, I actually don't spend much time with them. You know, not on that topic. My lived experience, Pete, is this, that I very rarely actually convince anybody to do anything. What I have been able to do, though, is if I ask questions and if I engage people in genuine discourse and struggle, that we might learn from each other. And so what I do try to do is just point to historic reality, you know, objectively about the role that alternative political parties have played. Because I will say this, and I'll say it again. If you believe that our current society is basically fair, is basically sustainable, is basically okay, you know, at the basic level, but you think that we need to tinker at the margins, that there are a couple of things that we need to change and tweak. To such a person, I say, you should probably consider either the Democratic or the Republican Party, figure out which one you really like, and then try to do your tweaks there. But if, like me, you want to restructure society, if, like me, you think we need to completely transform our social, political, and economic institutions. If, like me, you are a revolutionary, then I say the only way we can get there, I believe, is through an alternative political party. And I know it's hard, believe me, between ballot access, between exclusion from the debates, between a campaign system that turns our elections into auctions, between the corporate media who completely ignores us, or if they do ever talk about us, attempt to demean and degrade and otherwise marginalize us. In every way, the system is designed to prevent not just our success, it's literally designed to prevent our existence, and yet we're still here, right? Greens continue to run. We continue to win at the local level. There are several hundred Greens in elected office right now. We've elected, I think it's several thousand Greens have been elected since the Green Party began organizing at the local level. So it's a really important thing. So I think that as hard as it is to create an alternative political party, I think it's more likely to succeed than trying to work within the Democratic Party. I just don't think that that's going to work. The last thing I want to point out is this. To all those folks who say that they want to create a completely different political party, I just tell you this. All of the problems and difficulties that the Green Party faces, that other party is going to face as well, right? There's structural barriers. So to me, the infrastructure, history, and institutional knowledge that the Green Party has should not be taken lightly. But I also want to be honest, y'all. I believe that we need a mass movement and an electoral arm of that mass movement. I believe the Green Party is most likely to be that electoral arm. But if some other thing emerges and captures the imagination of vast swaths of the American people and it becomes the vehicle for transformational change, I'm not dedicated to just the name Green. I am a Green and proud of it because of the principles and values: peace, justice, democracy, ecology. But I don't think, I'm not slavishly devoted to the name. But again, I want to say this. I know how hard it is to create a political party, and what the Green Party has done, virtually nobody else on the scene anywhere near the capacity of what we've got. So I would encourage people to think about that. So Faramak Zahari asked, what is your plan for the Federal Reserve and the monetary system? So, the Green Party has a national platform on monetary reform. It follows the American Monetary Institute. It calls to completely democratize the Federal Reserve into a national bank, and it calls for ending the fractional reserve banking system. That's the Green Party's national platform position, and you can find out more about that on www.gp.org. That's the Green Party's portal, the National Green Party. It's interesting. I know that there's now a lot of debate. As far as I can tell, Farmak, there seem to be three sort of schools of thought around the monetary system and how to deal with it. The first big one seems to be, again, the American Monetary Institute, democratizing the Federal Reserve, eliminating fractional reserve banking broadly. I mean, there's a lot more, but that seems to be one big camp. The second camp seems to be a group called Modern Monetary Theory, which seems like what they're just saying is don't bother with fractional reserve banking, don't worry about that, just print money. Have the government print money and spend money, and don't worry about that. That's their basic idea. And then the third big sort of constellation or group around monetary theory seems to be folks who are advocating for public banks at either the local, state, or a national public bank. And that effort, I think, in a nutshell, basically says that it would allow all the public infrastructure projects to be funded and eliminate the finance cost associated, the financing of money, at least on public projects. So those seem to be the three big ones. And I'm actually interested in having advocates from each three on one of our programs. I've already talked to Michael O'Neill, our technical director, and he says that we should be able to pull that off. So stay tuned. I'm really looking forward to going deep on pulling out and having discourse between those three different ideas. Because for me, somebody who is not a monetary expert, it seems like there's a lot of commonality there, and the level of disagreement doesn't seem like it should be a fight to the death the way some advocates for one system or the other do. But I'm glad you asked the question. Alexander Dans asks, Why is Jill Stein propagating the divide among liberals? We should be united against the administration. Look, I got to tell you that I don't believe that we're propagating any divide. I do think this: it is absolutely critical to fight Trump and Trumpism and emerging neo-fascism. It is equally important to tell the truth that neoliberalism created the context and basically delivered Donald Trump into the White House. I think that we have to learn to fight Trumpism and neo-fascism and neoliberalism at the same time. So I don't think that I or Jill Stein or John Mubaraka are propagating any divide. I think that we're actually clarifying that there are profound differences in how to proceed. Again, at the end of the day, the neoliberals who actually control the Democratic Party are not going to restructure society. They are not going to actually engage in a mass Green New Deal that will wean us off of coal and oil and to sustainable energy. They will not deal with capitalism. They will not deal with restructuring society. So that's what I think. Andrea Maggio asked, did Bernie ever say why he wouldn't join the Green Party? He did not. In fact, he never responded to any of the efforts that Jill and the Green Party, the formal Green Party and Jill Stein campaign reached out a number of times. He literally never responded to us. So, you would have to ask Bernie or his supporters why. Michael Gagliano asked, can you describe a scenario where a third-party candidate can actually win a presidential election given the confines of the Electoral College? Answer, yes. Abraham Lincoln was a third-party candidate who won the office. The reality is this, that I absolutely believe that it is possible for an alternative political party to not only win the White House, but to actually completely take over local, state, and county government. But it's going to take, years. So I don't think that, I personally, again, don't think that focusing on the national presidential election is really where the real energy is. I do know this, that it is only by engaging in the national election that the Green Party gets any effort to have these kind of conversations. And the reality is, Jill Stein got over 1 million votes. The reality is that Jill Stein got a level of media attention that she never got whenever she was not a presidential candidate and doing all the work. So there is a real importance to continue to engage at that level. But again, at the end of the day, I believe that electoral politics as a revolutionary tool, a front of struggle, local, that's where we can actually win. I do want to lift up, though, two candidates who are not running in local municipal races, but are really worth looking at in special elections. Sherry Honkala, who is running for state legislature in a special election in Philadelphia, where not just one, but two of the prior office holders, Democrats both, are serving time for money laundering. So it's a real opening for the Green Party in North Philly and Kensington area. And then the second one is Kenneth Mejia, running for Congress in a special election in LA. Kenneth is running an incredible campaign. He's currently running third, I believe, behind two corporate-funded candidates, and it's a top two primary, so he's got a chance to break out as well. Patrick Scott Tanner asks, we need to plant work cooperative jobs all across America, where the people can earn what they want and workers own the company. Patrick, I totally agree with that, and I really want to encourage folks to check out the Solidarity Economy Network, the Next Systems Project, the American Federation of Worker Cooperatives. They are springing up everywhere, and I'm a huge supporter. So thank you for bringing up worker cooperatives as a way to actually transition into a cooperative society. David Broyles asks, are we open to changing the name of the party to something like the Progressive Party? Look, David, I'll tell you, I personally am not, I'm not beholden to the name Green Party. I know some Greens are. I will tell you this, that there is something magical about the fact that the Green Party is part of an international movement, and that there are Greens elected all across the globe. In fact, Jill and Dave Schwab, one of her staffers, is going to be going to the Global Greens Conference in Liverpool in April. So I personally would be open to changing the name if others started to do it. I just don't really, I don't have juice for it, right? But it's interesting that you bring this up, David, because some other people have asked basically the same question. They're wondering if the Green Party should change the name. As for me, I'm ambivalent, but not strongly so. Again, to me, it's the underlying principles: peace, justice, democracy, ecology, and a commitment to restructuring society that I'm all about. Fauji Daraga, and pardon me, Fauji, if I'm probably butchering your name, so please forgive me, but asked, what is your party's take on immigration, both legal and undocumented, I'm going to say. Because, again, go to the website, gp.org, and you can find the National Green Party's position. I'll tell you what I think, since this is actually just my show, right? I think this. There is no such thing as an illegal human being. Borders are arbitrary lines on a map. I believe in human rights. And I think that actually there should not, that we should actually have open borders. So I actually don't ever talk about illegal immigration, because I think it's an insulting way to even frame the question. At best, we can talk about whether somebody's documented or undocumented. But again, I am a revolutionary, and I would actually like to transform that. And these lines on a map are construct. They're made up. The birds don't follow them. The animals don't follow them. The rivers, nature doesn't follow them. I don't see any reason that they have to be so important. I'm not a nationalist. I don't believe in nationalism. I'm a human being, and I want to lift up a new human rights paradigm. So listen, I see that questions are still just pouring in. Thank you so much. These 30 minutes always just fly by. It was a fantastic opportunity to talk to you. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I want to invite you to please share this with other people. Let's continue to get the word out on the Dr. Jill Stein personal Facebook page. And you'll hear from me. You'll hear from Dr. Jill Stein. You'll hear from Ajamu Baraka. We are using whatever tools that we can. And remember, the revolution may not be televised, but it can be brought to you on the Green News Network, where we do not seek nor do we accept corporate money or financing. We're just having conversation with ordinary people. So I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Michael O'Neill, the technical producer. A big shout out and thank you to Melissa Figueroa, the executive producer of the Green News Network. Thank you to Dr. Jill Stein herself. This is her Facebook live stream for inviting me once a week to come on and have these kinds of conversations. Stay tuned, because either next week or the following week, we will have Chokwe Lumumba on, where he's going to be who's running for mayor in Jackson, Mississippi. I want to lift that struggle up and have a conversation with Chokwe. So in the meantime, register green, vote green, be green, and remember, the revolution will not be televised, but it will be brought to you with non-corporately filtered news, information, and analysis on the Green News Network. Peace.